The Behemoth Brewing Company presents the Department of Conversation with Pat Brittington. Behemoth, give me something hoppy.
Hello, team. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Department of Conversation. And we're very, very excited, honoured, privileged, any other words we can put in there, meaning happy to see Mr. David Downs. David, thanks for joining us.
Kia ora, nice to see you. I see that it's been a while since they took that photo from the intro there. Beard's grown a little.
Yes. No, I keep getting told by the person who designed it that we better do a new image at some stage, or I better shave my beard off. I haven't really.
Or Photoshop. Surely that's what Photoshop's for.
I'm just learning Photoshop at the moment. Actually, it's funny what lockdown has done to people's skill set. I've got two people in my life who are designers. One of them I worked with who kind of did a bunch of the technical side setting this up. Jason, people who know the podcast will know the name Jason. He was basically my technical producer for a long time. And then he was also responsible for all the imagery and that. And my partner is a designer as well. And she kind of developed a bunch of the look, like the logo you saw at the start. And then we tweaked it and made it exactly how we wanted to do. But since lockdown started, I've started to have to learn to do these things for myself.
Wow.
So I would say I'm getting fairly proficient with Photoshop right now. I know what layers are.
You know your way around Photoshop. Not a scissors, but you definitely know your way around Photoshop. It's good.
Maybe. Well, this is episode number 199. So you missed out on
I'll come back next week.
Yeah, come back next week. Well, actually, we're talking to you because of the New Zealand International Film Festival, and I think on Friday, I don't know if we'll upload it on Friday, but on Friday we're talking to the guys from There Is No I in Threesome, and they'll be episode 200.
Good on them. Well, that's cool. That sounds much more cool than me. That's fine.
I know it's a very good title. Mind you, yours is a very good title as well. Let's say why you're here. Actually, I was confused for a second why you're here because you are you have a lot of caps that you wear or have worn.
Literally,
obviously. Yes, actually, I'm the same. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 over there, but I don't have this camera's not plugged in at the moment, so I can't show you. And you do a lot of like public speaking and stuff. And I think on your Karen Hay, is it Karen Hay Management?
Okay.
Karen, right.
They Karen Hay, the muso from
broadcaster,
radio broadcaster. Yes.
They reference you as ex-comedian, and I was thinking that's an interesting. An interesting mantle to have because I thought sort of once a comedian, always a comedian. But
kind of a safety valve in case I'm not very good.
They call you ex-comedian. They also, obviously, you've got a couple of books out. There's an actor, there's a presenter. You're listed as a businessman, an entrepreneur, a CEO of various companies. And it's like, I mean, I imagine you're the kind of person that I go, oh, should we catch up? And you look at your calendar and you go, yeah, 3 weeks from Thursday would be good. Imagine that's the kind of guy you are. But the reason we're talking to you today is now you are you a filmmaker or are you the subject of a film?
No, I'm the subject. I'd be terrible at making films. This film was made by an amazing woman, Annie Goldson, and her friend Irene Chappell, and they approached me about making a film about what's a period of my life that we're probably going to talk about. And I thought, I'm not sure I want to, but because it was a strange period, but I was pretty overt and out there when I was going through this cancer that I had, so I thought, why not? And it's in the film festival, which is cool.
Yeah, and for people who are listening, you're not going to get to see this, but I'm actually playing. This is the trailer for it, which I'm just playing in silence beside us. If people are watching, you get to see you speaking to a crowd and kind of telling your story. One of the things I was interested about your story is you don't need to dig very deep to already find it on the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You obviously, as it's showing, just as we were talking there, it was showing you wrote about it on Stuff. And I imagine that catalog is still there on Stuff if people wanted to go read it. You've done lots of talks about it, including a TEDx in Auckland talk about it. So I was thinking as I was watching the documentary, well, before I started watching the documentary, which I understand you haven't seen yet, but I have. So that's 1-0 to me.
I've seen this promo, but I haven't seen much more than that, apart from where they asked me to check the names on the graphics. That was about it. Yeah. But you're winning.
I was going to go, how is this going to play out? What are they going to tell us in this documentary? Because obviously on a surface level, I already know your story because I've watched your TED talk. and I've read lots of your stuff on that. And was it ever a part of the conversation when you were starting this up, going, well, my story's already out there, how are we going to make a film about it?
It was a bit like that. I mean, I was pretty out there when I was sick. I was writing these columns, and I was pretty open with everything that was going on in my life, all the things that you did and didn't want to know about the effects of chemotherapy on the adult human male. But what they've done with the story, as I understand it, the treatment is more around the actual CAR T cell therapy that I had, and then other patients as well as me. And so it's a little bit of a sort of using me as a way to look into this concept of healthcare and equity of access to healthcare.
Yeah, so I guess you're the catalyst to talk about this CAR T cells therapy. Yeah. I guess even though I've just kind of said, everyone knows your story, it's not quite what I've said, but your story is out there. Maybe can you kind of synopsize it for us in, 60 seconds, just as a point of reference for people who have tuned in, they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, who is this turkey? Exactly.
Yeah, what we're talking about. Let's do that.
Yeah, no problem. So the film was about a period of my life, as I mentioned, where I thought I was a bit sick. I got what I thought was the flu and ignored it for a long time, but finally went to the doctor, reluctantly. My wife booked me an appointment, all the sort of normal stupid male stuff that we do. And then I discovered it wasn't a mild touch of the cancer. It was a pretty major problem with wasn't flu, it was cancer. I went into then months and months and months of chemotherapy here in New Zealand, and just trying all the different treatment options that were available. And during that period, as you said, I was writing about it. Like literally the first day I got diagnosed, I wrote a column and I sent it off to my mates at Stuff and said, do you want to publish this? And we ended up publishing one a week, if not more, sometimes more, for about 1.5 years. And it just followed this journey, which is cool because it's all sort of written in real time. At the end of a year of treatment, they told me that we've run out of options. You haven't got any more chemo available. We think we're done. You might have to go to hospice. You've got less than 1 year to live. So it was a pretty dramatic time, but I ended up through an amazing set of luck and coincidences and good fortune to find myself in Boston on a clinical trial for a new type of cancer therapy, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Just
pause there for a second, because that's, they talk about fucking serendipity.
Yeah.
And I can say that I'm when I talk to filmmakers or or subjects of films, you kind of don't want to give away the story, but your story is already out there heavily. Yeah. So I'll say this, like, it's people who don't know your story would learn it in the documentary, but it's out there anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
Some massive dude in Pfizer was a fan of New Zealand. He just happened to be reading your blog, and I think he says in the documentary it was 2016 or something, and he was a bit bummed about the news in America.
Yeah, he was definitely bummed about the political environment there, yes.
And so he, by chance, came across your blog, started reading it, wrote to you and went, dude, this is an awesome blog.
Yeah.
Just want to say, if I can ever do anything. You get to the end of, I guess, what would be called traditional medicine in New Zealand, or the New Zealand system, and you kind of go, this is the time to reach out. You reached out, and this person who had no reason to be connected to you, had no reason to have made contact with you after reading your story, who's one of the top guys in the medical world when it comes to, I guess, drug companies and stuff, and you went, help.
Help.
So
it's even a little bit more weird than that. And you're right, the movie gives it away pretty quickly in the first few minutes, actually. It's even more weird because he reached out to me over LinkedIn, like many people did. And at that point, I was just like, hey, read your blog, good on you. And it was about a month or 2 months later, and he sent me this message out of the blue. He said it just occurred to him just to say hello again. And he just reached out and said, hey, I just thought of you, I hope you're doing well. I literally, and this is no word of a lie, I had just received a call from the hospital here in New Zealand, and I know it's a hospital because it comes up with number unknown, and you go, oh, it's the hospital calling. I picked up the phone. As I picked up the phone, I saw his message, and it was like, hey, Mike here, just thought I'd say hello. And I got the message from the hospital, and then I texted him back immediately and said, right, we need help now. Like, we're just on our way to hospital to find out, but I know it's going to be bad news. So this was just this incredible serendipity, as you say. And then to complete the story, and you'll see it in the movie, I ended up going to Boston for treatment to Harvard Medical School, with the teaching hospital there, which is Massachusetts General Hospital. and there was a whole story in there about how much that was going to cost and the horrific, effort around that. And a whole lot of my friends helped me and went to Boston, had this treatment, which is incredible. I'm sure we'll talk about it. And I'm making a very long story short, but you said 60 seconds. And then I came back to New Zealand, and the film actually picks up from a lot of that, from what happens next, which is about how the fact that we wanted to really go, God, no one should have to go to Boston for treatment and spend what in the end was about $350,000. That's crazy. And I started getting approached because I was so out there. People were calling me and contacting me and saying, can I get some help? And how do I get on one of these trials and stuff like that? And so we were helping. I was helping. Mike was often helping. And then this amazing organization in Wellington, the Malligan Institute, have set up their own clinical trial. And just in the last year or so, we've actually launched a trial here in New Zealand. We had some patients go through it here. And so the film also picks up on the story of 3 other families that we met along the way, and tells their story as well. So it's not just about me, although they use me as a bit of a lens into the story. And so to cut a long story short, not to give away the ending, but I live.
Oh, do you?
Spoiler.
I was wondering if that was the case. I was going to one of the things I was unclear about in the documentary. Maybe I missed it. I'm dyslexic, and sometimes squirrel, and I miss things. I wondered when you went to Boston and they did this thing that I want to talk to you about, the CAR space T-cell therapy.
Yeah.
They take blood out, they go zippity zap, and they genetically modify it.
That's quite a medical term, actually. Are you qualified? Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you. And then they put it back in. What's the time period? That's about 3 weeks. But what's the time period between the putting it back in and what they put back in is half a teaspoon, 2.5 ml.
Yeah.
What's the period between them putting it back in? This is what I missed. And you kind of going, oh, I feel a bit better. I think you were up and about, sort of thing. I wanted to know what that time period is like, because it kind of looks like magic in the thing. And I kind of think
it's not quite like wave a wand and it happens, but it's about 8 days. It took about 8 days. So what happens is, just to correct a couple of minor details. They basically remove a component of the immune system. It's called the T cell. So it's basically like giving blood, but they're skimming off one particular type of cell called a T cell. And the T cell is normally, there you go, look at that. It's normally the part of the cell that fights infection, and it goes around. It's like think of it as Pac-Man. It's not far off it, going around the body, constantly looking for bad things, and then it sort of sends signals, and the immune system fights. So take that out. They genetically re-engineer that cell. They insert a new piece of step 2 there. They insert a new piece of DNA which reprograms the cell for it to be able to recognize cancer, and it recognizes it through the use of that little sucker thing, imagine a little antenna sticking out of a cell that's just configured in a certain way that matches a bump that's on the outside of a cancer cell. And so that's what they've done. They've reprogrammed the cell to make it make this antenna. Then they replicate in the lab, and then that whole process takes about 3 weeks, as you say, because it's very kind of technical and complicated, zippity zap, as you say. When they put it back inside me, so it was just a little injection, as you say, 2.5 mils, tiny little injection. Then I basically just waited, and I waited about just over a week, and then I felt like I got the flu again, which is so cool, because my book and my thing had been called The Mild Touch of the Flu, because that's what I thought when I first got cancer.
Right.
Well, actually, when I got this treatment, I felt the same way, because that's essentially what my body thought. It's the same flu symptom response, which is you get slightly sore under the arms and maybe a little bit sweaty and a little bit tired. And then it lasted about 3 or 4 days, maybe, of me feeling like I had the flu. And then about a week after that, so about 2.5, 3 weeks in total from the day it got injected into me, I went back and they did this extra test. And then they did a full body PET scan and a whole lot of blood tests, and at the end said there's no sign of cancer left. So during that period when I felt like I had the flu, that was because my body's immune system was going into overdrive and just fighting what it thought was a foreign invader was actually a cancer cells, and it was going around and zapping them.
So just say again, because I might have just dyslexic out for a second. The injection going in, them saying no signs of cancer. Is that 8 days?
No, that was about 3 weeks. It took 8 days.
8 days is starting to feel better.
8 days while my body was kind of replicating the cells and growing them till I could start feeling it working. Then that took about a week, and then it was about another week, and then they said, right, we can test you now, and you're finished. Yeah.
How long were you doing chemo in New Zealand for?
About a year.
So a year.
And even before then, I'd probably had cancer. They don't know, but I probably had it for about a year before that as well.
Right.
So it's probably 2 years of my body fighting cancer.
So 2 years of your body fighting cancer, and I guess the cancer growing, whatever the correct term is. 3 weeks of this new form of therapy, cancer gone.
Yeah. And during that 3 weeks, just to make it even cooler, was me going to the movies, wandering around the museums of Boston. I went to the Cheers bar, like I was going, bugger it, I'm here, I might as well have fun. Being a tourist, like sometimes I felt a bit, when I was feeling crook, I just sort of stayed in bed for a few days, but it's like the flu, wasn't a big deal. So yeah, it wasn't me in hospital or hooked up to massive machines or anything. It was kind of just a gentle response.
And when you went to the Cheers bar, did everybody know your name?
No, it's a fallacy. And I knew that immediately because I walked in there and I thought, if everybody knows your name, then I should know everyone else's name immediately. And I didn't. So I thought, my whole life has been a lie.
So they didn't
Not
go,
only that, you go into the Cheers bar and it looks like the same from outside, but inside it's completely different. So
right. I have been thinking about the idea of where we're going in medicine for a long time, and for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
I've got, like, from my rugby days, I've got arthritis in my spine, and from my basketball days, I've got thinning cartilage on the back of my kneecaps.
Mate, you're a mess.
I am a fucking mess. I'm probably the same person. Like both my mum and dad had knee replacements. They all played, tennis and squash and softball and all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I've been holding on to, for the last 5 years, that probably in the future there won't be knee replacements. There'll be stem cell replacements, because there's examples at the moment of stem cells growing bone and growing cartilage already happening around the world. Does it feel a bit the same? I mean, I could be wrong with that, but that's my little world saying I don't want to get a knee replacement in 20 years. Does it feel a bit the same with cancer? Is this the thing that's going to be in 20 years from now? They're going to be like, what? People died from cancer?
Yeah, how old-fashioned. We hope so. We definitely hope so. I mean, in the film, you'll see these interviews with people much more expert than this and me. But the points they're making is that this is sort of the beginning of something. It's not the answer completely. It's an answer for one type of cancer, blood cancer, but it's showing that there's a whole new way of treating cancer. And in the last sort of 10 or 15 years in research terms, there's been a lot of work going on into the immune system. And it makes perfect sense. Like, to us lay people, you go, actually, the human body is incredible. If 99.99999% of the stuff that goes wrong, our body just fixes it. Maybe not your cartilage, but even then, it has a pretty good go. And yet every now and then it can't. And also the other sort of big insight was that if I took a cancer cell out of me and I put it into you, and I wouldn't wish this on you, what would happen is immediately your body would kill it because it recognizes it as foreign. And so those sort of two insights are kind of what lead to this work, because they're going, well, hang on, because what's going on? Like, if bodies are really good at fighting stuff, and cancer cells that are seen by foreign bodies get killed immediately, like we know that, why isn't the body killing cancer? And it's because it sort of hides in plain sight. Like, the immune system just doesn't recognize that cell as cancer. And so all they're doing is saying, well, why don't we tune up the immune, instead of fighting the cancer, why don't we harness the immune system? It's really good at fighting stuff. So that's what this treatment does. It does nothing to the cancer. It purely changes the immune system in a way that actually gets the immune system doing its job, sort of kickstarting it. So yes, in 20 years' time, I would confidently predict as a layperson that we'll see many, many, many different types of cancer being treated in these types of techniques. We'll know a hell of a lot more about it. Even now, I mean, I did this treatment I actually did 3 years ago now. Now they're using the same technique for about a dozen different types of cancer, not just blood cancer. And there are trials going on all over the world with these different techniques. So yeah, we're at the beginning of a really exciting period.
It is exciting. It's exciting to think of the idea of kind of reprogramming human cells. When I kind of thought about it, and I'm a bit of a buff-headed guy, but I remember back in the day when you had CRT TVs and you had, we first came out with plasma TVs, and at some stage there was a changeover where you couldn't work your CRTs because none of the plugs worked anymore, but you could buy adapters. Yeah. And I thought, this kind of sounds like an adapter for the old TV. You've got this new thing that won't go into it, but you put a special little adapter on the end, and all of a sudden
right.
it works again.
That's
And
right.
that's what I was the kind of thinking about for what they're doing to ourselves.
That's right. In the movie, a guy called Charles Graeber, who's another author, who's written all about this type of therapy, likens it to sort of vacuum cleaner nozzles. You can change the nozzles on the vacuum cleaner, same sort of thing. And it's almost literally what this does. It basically just makes the cell have a new type of nozzle. And that nozzle happens to be the same shape and kind of, orientation, etc., that will latch onto the right type of cancer cell.
What about other areas other than cancer? Is this like a step into, like I'm going through quite a lot of conversations with friends, family, and strangers about the vaccine at the moment and that sort of thing.
Well,
and one of the reasons I'm quite passionate about that is my father caught polio in 1948. So I have a lifelong kind of history of seeing what happens when someone gets a virus, an illness that affects them for the rest of their life. My dad's still with us. He's 81. He's still affected by polio. He's got no muscle mass in one of his arms. He literally can't lift it up to his shoulder. That's what polio did to him. So when I talk to people and they're like, oh, blah, blah, let's find out. It's not going to work. It's this, it's that. I always think, fuck, if we had people in 1948, which is when my dad got it, going, we didn't have parents going, oh, aluminium. Oh, this is the government trying to control us. We're going to become magnetized. They were like, solution to keep our kids safe. Let's do it.
Correct.
So I'm wondering about this and what you also see as like a bigger sort of medical advances. Is it being used in other areas? Are you now someone who's like, holy crap, I can see it here and here and here. I'm passionate about this and this and this now because of your one experience with cancer.
I mean, I definitely can see the techniques that they're using here. I mean, first of all, you got to appreciate, and a friend of mine sent me this beautiful text message the day I got this injection, and it said something like, imagine the millions of insights and wisdom and small pieces of knowledge that have come together over probably a century of human endeavor to reach this moment where this can happen for you. So it's not like there's a breakthrough. There's just lots and lots of incremental movements, and so the techniques and the processes and the way that they manufacture cells, the way they keep them cold enough, the way that they now know how to read the gene sequences, all those things come together. And yes, they can be used in other ways. The mRNA vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine that we are using in New Zealand, has some very similar technology in it, because what it does is it actually it inserts a piece of mRNA, so messenger RNA, to basically fool your cells into creating the protein spikes that the coronavirus has, which then allows the T cells to recognize them and learn about them and kill them. So it's got some very similar conceptual things, and that it's harnessing the body's immune system in a slightly different way, sort of semi-tricking it into doing a different job. So that absolutely, I mean, I've heard of these sorts of techniques being used for spinal injuries, and as you say, things like where you've got cells in your body that have died over time. Maybe this is a way to kickstart them back into action. Brain diseases, things that where you atrophy over time. So yes, we definitely know stuff in a way that we didn't know it for many years. And one thing that I just want, I bet you're going to ask me, but I want to say it anyway. So some people get a little bit worried about the whole gene editing thing, and it's probably worth just kind of really tackling that up front, because this is gene editing, but in a completely different way than you think about it. This is not taking frogs' genes and sticking them into corn or whatever, and this isn't in any way transmissible. In fact, what they're doing with my T cells, the reason I had to keep going back to Boston for 2 years, is because they were seeing what happens over time, and because they know that those cells will die off eventually. All cells in our body do. There's no way they can be transmitted to other people or between generations. And that's the kind of, we have so much more sophistication about understanding this stuff than we did 20 years ago when gene editing became the big boogeyman. So yeah, it's the techniques, the processes, everything are amazing.
I think as well, I mean, I think we live in a very privileged, not just here in New Zealand, but certainly in the first world, we live in a very privileged kind of life where it's a little bit of NIMBY, NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And the example is, I remember, I think I might have still been working in Talkback, but there was a measles outbreak in Waikato. And I remember it very clear that all of a sudden a whole bunch of anti-vaxxers were getting their kids vaccinated. Why? Because they had to. So they didn't have the luxury or the privilege of going, oh, no to vaccines. When the rubber hit the road, they went and got it. And I wonder about the whole gene editing and people saying that's the boogeyman. You know, if their kid or family member or whatever had the cancer where this would happen, are they going to just let them die, or are they going to go for it? And I think I try and think about, I when I used to work in talkback, I used to quite often say to my callers, and then what?
Yeah.
And then what? You know, okay, it was ZB, so they're all right-wing lunatics, of who I love to bits. But you know, so let's get rid of that solo mum from the Housing New Zealand house next door to you. But then what? She's next door to someone else, or she's in a car with her kids. You know, what's the actual for real downstream effects of that? So I think these conversations around health at the moment, especially at the moment with kind of vaccine, and not that it's vaccine passports is necessarily health, but that sort of conversation.
Yeah.
I go, you know, for these people who are at the Brian Tamaki event last weekend or whatever it was, you know, if they had 100 cases of Delta in their road, would they be as free about their freedoms, or would they want to be locked away then? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You do get into some really different perspectives of different people. The other thing that people, I think it's really important to realize, and I think I use this example in the documentary, is how fast this stuff has evolved, how much we now know versus when you and I were younger or kids or whatever. And if you think about, like, I was talking to a friend yesterday who's a bit sort of anti, you know, this sort of stuff, this treatment, you know, and I said to him, have you got an iMac or an iPhone? He went, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so 25 years ago, when this technology was just starting to be developed, there was no mobile phone. You know, the mobile phones were pretty rubbish. There was no, you know, internet. There was no, you know, laptops were massive, etc. Imagine you can only imagine how much technology has changed in that time to give you this incredible thing called a mobile phone. That same progress has been made in health and in science. We now know, you know, 1,000,000 times more than we did back then, and it's so much more sophisticated than you or I could ever get our head around, because you need to spend 10 years understanding it. So don't be fearful of it. You know, be wary and educate yourself properly.
And it's not even I think about that, and I think it's not even what we know, like with our cell phones. I wonder about what fucking Apple and Samsung have got in the back room that we won't see for 10 years. You think about that with the medical thing as well. What's happening in labs right now that we'll see in 10 years from now. It's amazing. I had a friend of mine say once, he was doing a speech, and he said once, the world has never moved as fast as it's moving right now, and it will never move this slow again.
Exactly.
You know, just think,
we are in a period of exponential growth, and we always have been. The problem with exponential growth is it looks like a flat line when you first start. Exponential, you know, doubling or going up in some direction, and then all of a sudden you start to realize and perceive change happening really rapidly. That's why humans are terrible at perceiving change. Like we look around us, it looks pretty much the same today as it did yesterday. That doesn't mean that progress hasn't happened. It just means you're not seeing it. And then all of a sudden you go, hang on, the iPhone 54 is out. Oh, only yesterday I remember having a Motorola Flip.
Motorola Flip. Back to the conversation around your treatment. I was going to ask one question for clarity as well, because just so you can explain maybe what it is. When I heard the conversation around these T cells, the T cell cancer therapy, about the only other time I ever remember hearing a T cell is people who have HIV/AIDS, because they talk about having a very low T cell count.
T cell count, yeah.
So what exactly is, by itself, without all the modifications we're doing to help cancer, what is the T cell and what does it do in our bodies day to day?
Yeah, cool. So they're a type of lymphocyte, if you want to be technical. And so basically what we call blood, like you and I in our layman's terms would say, you've got blood. And when we were at school, we learned you've got white blood and red blood. Well, actually, that's a vast simplification of the complexity of our blood. You know, we have in the human blood, you know, 30 to 50, I don't know how many different types of cells. Some they have different jobs. Some of them are carrying oxygen to, you know, fuel the body. Some of them are, you know, part of this, you know, immune system. And even in the immune system, there's loads of different types. They all do different things. So a T cell is a type of cell that's created, and it's called T because it's created in the thalamus, which is down here somewhere. Doctor will probably tell me off, but it's somewhere around here. There's a little tiny gland called the thalamus, and for some reason that generates some cells, and it's part of a kind of almost a team of different cells which collectively fight infection. So there's also B cells, and in fact, my cancer was a cancer of the B cells. So the B cells were the ones that had gone wonky in my body. The T cells could be used to fix the wonky B cells. So they basically are going around your blood, constantly being generated and going around your body, and the T cell's kind of looking for things that aren't right, things that doesn't recognize, protein sticking up out of cells that it goes, oh, that doesn't look like the sort of thing that we should expect to see. And the T cell kind of hones in on it, and it sends messages through chemicals to other cells, and they come on and they kind of kill it. And I'm simplifying it, but what you should know is that we now know so much more about how that sort of stuff operates than we used to. And it's a quite an elegant symphony of cells doing jobs and coming and going and stuff. And so all we've done is just for one of those cells, we've tweaked it a little bit to give it a bit of extra help. It's like showing it what the cancer cell looks like.
I love it how you say I've simplified it a bit, and I'm thinking, hang on, what you're describing to me sounds like they're the security guards in my body. I think
that's it. Exactly. There you go. I call them like
1,000-fold.
Exactly right. They are the security guards.
And they're going up to this foreign body and say, look, not in those shoes. You can't come inside in those shoes. Sorry.
That's right.
You'll have to go elsewhere. Actually,
I saw it. And then the other thing is, the other part of the metaphor is the security guards can call for help, so they can go, right, we've got a bad one here, and they can call in the other cells to come and kind of help them do the cleanup, which is pretty cool. So yes, the body's quite incredible the way it does this sort of thing. And when you think about going back to the virus and the sort of vaccine, what it's doing is essentially a shortcut of teaching it does the same job. It's teaching the immune system what the coronavirus looks like, so that next time a single coronavirus comes in, the body goes, oh, I've seen that before, I know what to do, instead of waiting till there's millions and millions and millions of them and then going, oh, okay, too late, we missed it.
Hey, check this out. I just went and found this now because I just by chance saw this yesterday. I'll show it to you for people to understand what it's like for your body to respond. This is white blood cells attacking a parasite.
Wow, yeah.
Check this out. This is actually what is happening. I'm not playing the audio, so we don't get it taken down. But this is your blood, your body, your various T cells attacking exactly what you're talking about, identifying and attacking something.
There's a beautiful image of this, exactly what I've had, the cancer T cell, and what you see is on the screen is just a cell going through. It's on a petri dish, and that's a cancer cell, and then it's sort of a T cell wanders past and sort of almost like noticing it. You can see it going, oh, what's that? Hang on. And it sort of goes around the outside of it, inspecting it. And then when it realizes it's not right, another one or two come along, and then they just send a little signal, and you see this thing just go flash, because it basically explodes the nucleus.
So what that is that's the security guard walking around that one thing going, can I see a lanyard on that person? Okay, I can't see a lanyard. Okay, I need some help over here. There's someone in here without a lanyard. And then the other two security guards turn up and they fuck them up, basically.
That's right. You should definitely go into medicine. You've really got this sort of...
a big part of the documentary, and I guess it's the thing that catches a lot of people that you talk about in your TED talk as well, is the cost.
Yeah.
Because let's not talk about, because you have some quite entertaining ways of explaining the story. Let's leave that for the movie, right? But let's talk about the cost of medical procedures.
Yeah.
Do you have any perspective or opinion now? So I love talking to Americans about America.
Yeah.
And I love talking to Americans. I do another product called Elephant TV, which is a series of debates. And I want to do one called America is the greatest country in the world, and then have a pro and a con.
Yeah.
Because always when I have American commentators on my podcast, I ask them, is America the greatest country in the world? And they say yes. And I say, what's your metric for that? I'd like to understand what's your metric. And often we come back to conversations around healthcare because of our differences. Wow. And they say we've got the greatest healthcare in the world. And I always say, yes, if you can afford it.
Wow.
Which I think is a fair response to, look what's happened with you. It's a world-class, innovative thing out of America, greatest system in the world, supposedly, but it's if you can afford it. Do you have a perspective now on American healthcare and the cost, and what does it make you think about how we do things here when, yes, there are sometimes waiting queues, yes, there are sometimes, I don't know if there's still, but there has been stories about, there's no room for that person to get the cancer treatment, so they have to go to Sydney. In fact, I think that was in one of the documentary of one of the guys going off to Melbourne. I'd just be interested in you've been in both systems. You've been a sufferer of a incredibly large bill, which we're not going to talk about because that's actually an interesting part of the documentary. Yeah, the floor is yours.
No, cool. I mean, it's you hit on a really important theme from the film, and you know, a key learning thing. And I guess the first thing you got to caution yourself always against when you come up with a topic like this is there is no good answer. There is no right. There is no wrong. There are no evil people and good people. This is one of those gnarly human problems of the shades of grey that every way you look at it's difficult. In the New Zealand health system, and I spent a good year and a half being a beneficiary of that. There's some incredible things to love and some things that don't work well. You know, what you love is that it's free. You know, it's socialized medicine, great quality doctors, great quality nurses, good medical interventions. But yeah, you do it sometimes in an environment where the hospital is not quite as nice as it could be. They don't have access to all of the drugs they'd like to because we can't afford everything. It's not an infinite pot of money. Then you go to America and it's sort of the opposite side of the problem where you pay for every single thing. Like literally, I was given a Panadol, you know, here's a Panadol, $6 each, you know.
Whoa.
And, you know, so you pay for everything. And so therefore it makes it that much more unaffordable and difficult to get to. But because you've got this money washing around the system, you get incredible innovation and breakthrough and science that wouldn't happen if we all had systems like New Zealand. So there's no perfect answer here. What I do know is, having spent time in both systems, is that the quality of the actual medical advice, the doctors, etc., was just as good on both sides.
Right.
And that was really quite delightful and enlightening. In fact, I came back to New Zealand and I told my New Zealand doctor that the American doctor had been through all of her notes and all of her procedures over the months and months that she'd been treating me. And he said, at every single point in your treatment, that she made the same decisions I would have made. And I told her that, and she's like, yes. Yeah, but we did it without being able to go that extra few steps, which is the access to the innovation and the kind of breakthrough science that they have access to because of that. So there's no simple answer. It would be great if you could have both, but that's just the world. You know, it doesn't work that way. And pharmaceutical companies have got to make money. You know, like I don't buy into that big bad pharma thing. If pharmaceutical companies didn't make money, they wouldn't be around, and there wouldn't be any new medications. So, like, you know, I think it's a gnarly, intractable problem that has no solution.
I was going to make a joke there saying it's a lovely fence sit. I won't say that because that's completely valid. Completely valid what you're saying, and I tend to agree with you about the overall issue. I mean, I'm not the kind of person who thinks businesses shouldn't make money. And as you're saying, it sounds like, I mean, I'm sorry that I'm using another analogy, but it seems to be what I do. It's like two first 15 rugby teams that have equal talent, but one is far better resourced.
Yeah.
You know, with training techniques and methods, and so then they end up being better in the big game because they've had the resource driven into them that's given them like one step up.
Well, the other thing I'd say, though, just to counter your friend's argument against you, is that actually, if you step back and look at the total population outcomes for both a country like New Zealand and a country like the US may spend does spend a hell of a lot more on healthcare than we do for no better outcome whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, worse in some places. Yeah. And so, that whole thing, and I don't sort of argue against Americans because they're amazing people and I love them. And in fact, I learned so much about. They're very, very different than the cliche perspective that you sometimes have. But yeah, just blanketly saying we've got the greatest health system because we spend the most money is actually a completely false thing.
Well, because it doesn't. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but the bottom 30% see none of that money, so that's where they get their bad outcome. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not saying Michael Moore is the most trustable documentary maker in the world, but when he showed individual stories, which is anecdotal, about a guy having to keep one of his two fingers because he couldn't afford the operation for both fingers, so he chose to keep the finger which had his wedding ring on it because he's an old romantic. Because I also think when my mum passed away 3 years ago from motor neuron disease. And, I've told the story before. She had, I forget which country it was, but she had a bed from Germany or a wheelchair from Germany and a wheelchair from Japan or a bed from Japan, whichever one it is. She had this and she got the best care. Nothing happened to her. And those kind of emergency moments where you have to get medical attention now, New Zealand does very well. It seems where if there is a failing and, I'll say that no system's perfect. It's in that long term, looking after something, finding innovation, That's where we fall down.
And the people who fall outside the norm, yeah, and that's just, again, it's a consequence. It's not. It's just the way it is. Like when you choose to take a free healthcare model, there will always be cases that can't fit in because they're just expensive. And so I get it. It doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it right necessarily. It just makes it a bit more understandable. And in the film, in the documentary, you'll see a couple of patients there that had to go overseas, like me, for treatment and different outcomes in some cases. And it's just a sort of an unfortunate consequence of the way that there is not an infinite pot of money and an infinite sort of set of resources available.
Have two questions, both based around government, especially in New Zealand.
Cool.
When you got, and we can say the big bill, we'll leave the details to the documentary. But when you got the big bill, did you go to the government at any stage? Did you go to the health minister? It probably was my local boy in North Dunedin at that stage. Did you go to them at any stage and say, please help? That's question number one. Question number two is, since going through it, have you had any interaction with government agencies on the treatment you have had and how much we should get it in New Zealand?
So the answer to the first question is no. I didn't seek or get any help from the ministry. I did ask my doctor if she thought it was something we should be bothered with, and she basically said no. And we were in a very short time frame back then. And again, don't want to give away too much, but I had like a week or 2 weeks to make some calls and decisions about what we're going to do. So the path of least resistance was just what we thought, sell our house, actually. So we didn't go down that track. And then we also had a health insurance company that we were dealing with, and that didn't work out very well either. So the answer was no, not really. The second thing is, since then, have I? Yeah, there's been some conversations. In fact, I've sort of talked to people within the ministry, well, the sort of health system of New Zealand and the New Cancer Authority a little bit, not hugely, but there's certainly receptivity to discussions. And the Malligan Institute, who feature in the movie, because they're a cancer research institute in Wellington, who have now developed their own version of this. They have been, incredible here, because they sit as a private institution, but they have a lot to do with the government system. So they're kind of influencing. And the patients in New Zealand who have been lucky enough to get on the trial here in New Zealand have done that for free. The Malligan Institute do their part of the work for free, and then Leukemia and Blood Cancer New Zealand, who's a charity, has paid for all the patients' sort of travel costs and stuff like that. So we are incredible. In fact, when I tell my American friends and colleagues that we essentially get it for free, but not from the government or not from an insurance company, they find it, quite remarkable. But that's just, I guess that's the way it is. Our system here has led us to this.
Yeah, I've had conversations with I agree with you about Americans. I love Americans, and I love their passion, and I love, they're typically are fantastically nice people in general. Obviously, there are some dicks amongst them, but as there are with everybody. But when I explain, like I spoke to a couple before the last election who were very conservative. There were a couple of musicians who wrote the Vote Trump song, actually, a couple of, Southern girls who are country western singers. And they talked about how they were really upset because their health system let their brother down, and he had to get a scan, and it cost him $10,000, and
Wow.
and they were Republicans. And I went, you should be a Bernie voter. I mean, Bernie's the guy who would have given your brother nothing. And I explained to them my mother's situation, and they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that my kids could go down and get asthma puffers, plural, from the chemist for $5. They're like, they actually don't get it. They don't understand.
And because for some reason in that system, the kind of idea of socialized medicine, as they call it, it's been conflated politically to be socialism, which they then see as this huge evil, whatever your political thing. So it's just become politicized, and it's terrible. And luckily in New Zealand, and when you've only lived in New Zealand, you find it's hard to believe, but we are very apolitical. I mean, we're shades of grey on the other side of a very small fence. It's like mostly we agree on most things that are important, but that's not necessarily the case in every country.
I struggle with this question, just so you know.
Oh, good. I'm looking forward to a struggling
question. For many reasons. Well, I know you've talked about survivor guilt, but for something completely separate to what we're doing here, and it wasn't for this reason, but I talked to I was in contact with two other comedians this week, two other high-profile comedians. Every New Zealander would know their names, and one of them called you a legend, and the other one called you, I'm just reading his text, an amazing man.
Oh, I thought, sorry. Different comedian didn't talk to my
in the video, the documentary, a lot of it is quite, about the victories that this medicine can bring, this new system, the new way of doing things can do. But there are sadnesses, and there are, right here in Dunedin, there are sadnesses where other people don't make it. And I just wondered from you, are you a person who thinks about fate? Are you a person who thinks about, you hear this all the time, I'm here for a reason, I have a job to do. Do you ever go, some people would look at it as a religious or a spiritual thing as well. Do you ever think about why you're here, why it worked on you? Do you feel an obligation to this now because of what you went through, when for some others, they don't have the same outcome?
So you asked 6 questions, and the answer is yes, sometimes no, maybe yes. No, yeah, it's a great point, and we do sort of talk about this in the movie a little bit. Or the documentary maker asked me these questions, which makes me search my mind. Absolutely, I'm not a fate guy. I don't believe that there is a preordained fate that we all have, and suddenly that's it. You've found your purpose. For the point of view that it's preordained, I do though think that we as humans are meaning makers. Our part of what we seek to do is to understand and to create meaning out of stuff. And so when things fall into place, it feels better. So for me, going through my cancer, and getting to the States, getting the treatment, coming back, feeling incredibly lucky, meeting many people who have not had that outcome, meeting families who have lost loved ones, has made me, I suppose, create meaning out of that. It's made me think, okay, I've got to find the opportunity. And also I'm very lucky. I say this, I'm an incredibly privileged and lucky person. I was in a position where, while we couldn't afford the initial money they told us, we actually managed to find our way to pay the money, and it didn't bankrupt the family. So we're incredibly lucky. And I find myself in a position sometimes where I can talk to lots of people. I'm quite comfortable. So I feel like it's semi-obligation to be the person who has a sort of a cheerleader, or holds up the possibility of what the future might bring. And it helps me because it helps me create meaning. It does mean that I'm constantly meeting people who are very sick or dying or have died or whatever, and that's tough at times. It's very tough, but it also kind of brings even more meaning to it in a funny way. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying, and I say it in the movie, I don't feel survivor guilt, but I kind of get it. I feel survivor kind of this obligation, or the sense that actually by me doing things that will help other people, and it's not just me, by the way, my wife helps. She talks to other families fairly regularly too about the experience of being the caregiver in this scenario. Right. So it's almost like become a thing our family does, and that helps us. And it gives us that sense of a little bit of sense of purpose and a little bit sense of closure, I suppose.
Is this something now that the work you're doing with especially the CAR T cell and the cancer work, is this kind of your 70%, 80%, 90% full-time job, like what you spend most of your time on, or is this just still a part of a very full life? You have other areas you're working on?
Yeah, it's part. One of my problems is I'm a complete optimist, as you'll see in the movie, and I have a big appetite for work and stuff, and I just love things, and I get involved with all sorts of projects. So the cancer work I do and the patient work's probably a day a week, maybe, I don't know. But then I've got a full-time, not quite full-time job. I've got a sort of a part-time permanent job, and then I've got 3 or 4 other projects that I work on, like I'm on boards and and I'm helping a friend who's sick at the moment, so basically there's always this juggling, but I'm at that stage of my life where that's fine. Like the kids, my kids are a little bit more grown up. They don't need me quite as much. They still need me, but not quite as much. And I get an enormous sense of joy and a satisfaction out of these different things that I work on, and they do complement each other pretty well. There was a period there when we were raising money for the Malaccan Institute to get the CAR T trial into New Zealand, where it was like 2 to 3 days a week. That was much more full on, but we managed to raise that money collectively, and then the trials kicked off, and so they don't need quite as much of my time, but I'm still their ambassador, so I kind of get rolled out every now and then. And yeah, and I really enjoy it. It's good fun. And doing things like being a bit more vocal in the press and stuff usually gets a few more people contacting me, and that's fine. So yeah, it sort of comes and goes.
I thought if it was okay with you, what we might do is, it's part of your TED talk, so it's out there in public.
Cool.
I don't think this has been a big heavy conversation. I think it's been great fun, and I'm really happy we've talked about it. But I did want to wrap up on something to do with one of the lighter parts of your treatment.
Yeah,
I will play this again in the background in silence. But when I saw this, I guess what I want to do, David, is I think this is fucking genius, right? And so I want, whether people never watch your TED talk or the documentary, how dare they, or see another thing, I think that this little part of your story, for me at least, was so powerful. And I was wondering if you could maybe nutshell what we're looking at.
Yeah,
and
cool.
I'll play a little bit of the video in the background in silence while you're talking over it, and then I'll switch it out and just tell us what you're doing here and why you look like a bunch of lunatics.
Yeah, I guess the key point here is going to a hospital is a very alien environment for people, and if you're not used to it, it's quite disempowering, and it makes you feel like a victim of the situation. And so what we would do as a family is say, right, let's pretend we're going on holiday. Instead of going into hospital for a week at a time, because it was a week every third week for months and months and months, let's go on holiday. And so okay, where are we going to go this month? So, this time was obviously Fiji, Paris, so we went and got props and costumes and posters on the walls. And, my sister came and gave an art class that week, for example. And, it was kind of fun. And the doctors and the nurses got really into it. Like when they were doing their rounds, I made them dress up. You can see a lot of those people in there are doctors and nurses. My visitors really enjoyed it. Like I made a rule that anyone could come and visit, but they had to come in some sort of costume, and we'd publish what the theme of the week was and the costume of the week, and people would come along, and you'll see actually some of those comedians later on, actually, if you keep playing, who would come in and, just kind of join into it. I know it's going to despair. That's just me talking. But the idea is you're trying to change the perspective. So instead of being a victim of the environment, you are now someone who's actually in control of it. And it's a very simple thing. Like all we did was put posters up and, bring some $2 shop costumes and that sort of stuff. You can see that there's Corby and John Bridges.
There's Corby there.
Yeah. But it's an enormously powerful thing, because it sends people a message that you are yourself. You're not some new person that's on the scene. You're still yourself. So we really enjoyed it, and it also kind of changed. It made us more anticipating. And what I found out later is some of those practices that were built up then were very good from a mental health point of view in terms of building up resilience and building up some of the the practices, the mindfulness, the kind of appreciation, the kind of making fun of the situation in a way that really kind of creates more of a sense of empowerment. They were actually good practices to have from a mental health point of view. And there you go. That's the conclusion, is that sometimes in life you don't get to choose the room that you're in. You can't change your circumstances. What you change is your response, your attitude. And it's a hugely powerful thing. I keep coming back to it with lots of people. Don't see yourself as the victim of the situation. Put yourself in that driver's seat of being in control of your response and your attitude, and it just changes everything.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing lesson for whatever stage of life you're in. For the past few weeks, I've been talking to people, and not to get into the politics of it, but around this, vaccine and people having to be vaccinated for certain jobs. But coming back to, sometimes we all have to make difficult choices.
Yeah.
But as Michelle Pfeiffer once so beautifully said, there are no victims in this classroom. We can always make a choice at some level. And the example I give to people is, I know lots of people who had young families who had to leave Auckland away from their family and their support networks because they wanted to own a house. Yeah. So they could have said, I'm forced to leave Auckland to get a house, but the truth is they made a very difficult choice to leave Auckland to get a house for their family. Yeah. So I love that.
Awesome. I'm glad you find it useful. And to me, it's a big lesson. I talk to other patients a lot about some of those things, and how you put yourself back into that responsibility. How do you put yourself in control? And if nothing else, you have to flip that little switch in your head that says, actually, I might be sitting here in bed, I might be wired up to a machine, but I could make someone laugh. I could make someone else's day better. I could think about positive things, not the potential downsides, you know. So there's a whole lot of things you can do, including watching that great movie. Look at
Yeah,
that.
and here we go. What a perfect wrap up. New Zealand International Film Festival, A Mild Touch of Cancer. Unfortunately and sadly, the Auckland screenings have been shut down. Now, I should have found this out, and it's not your job to know this, so I apologize if you don't know this. I'll find out and put something on the Facebook page. But I think last year they had a bunch of online versions to watch movies. Do you know if they're doing that this year?
I have no idea.
No.
Good thing for us both to know, but I don't. Yeah.
I'll contact them, and people can have a look on the Facebook page, DOCNZ on Facebook, and we'll put some links if there's some if there are some online, because they did that last year for whatever it's called. Look, there's the Dunedin Regent, 20th of November.
There we go.
They did a bunch of online movies. You could watch them online as well. They set up a system, so I'm hoping they can do that again. So people in Auckland, you can maybe get to watch it online. Do you know? Obviously it'll do the festival rounds around the world as well. Do you know, is it coming after the festival? Is it coming back to the big screens for people to see? Do you know what the next plan is?
I don't know that for sure. I guess it depends on how popular they think it might be. I mean, on one hand, you'd think, okay, a documentary about a boring guy wandering around the world talking about cancer does not sound all that compelling. But it sort of depends. Maybe it will be. I mean, I know that we had planned to do some fundraising showings of it, both in Auckland and Wellington, for the Malaghan Institute and for leukemia and blood cancer, both of which have had to be cancelled because of the lockdowns. So that's sad. So we'll at least, I think, redo another showing sometime next year because of that. So I'm hoping that will allow a few more people to see it as well.
Well, the exciting thing at this day and age, and the guys we're talking to later this week about There's No I in Threesome, they sold theirs to HBO Max. You know, so that's actually been on HBO Max since February of this year. So I remember working with someone way back in the early 1990s, a million years ago, and them saying, if you want to make content, which is not a word we use then like we use today, but if you want the most eyes to see it, put it on TV. That's where the most eyes will see it. And in this day and age, when we've got things like, you know, Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus and that kind of stuff, so many more eyes can see stuff around the world. I mean, maybe that's a great outlet.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm the subject, not the filmmaker, but Annie, who's the filmmaker, I'm sure will be trying to get it onto a few of the streaming platforms. It's playing on some film festivals in the US at the moment too. So there's probably some sort of thing where you go through the festivals first and then you do the streaming. I don't know, but yeah, but I hope that if people do get to watch it, because on one hand, it's a boring story about me wandering around the world, but on the other hand, hopefully it's a message about, you know, science and breakthroughs and optimism, positivity, and I hope you take that out of it, because that's kind of why I did it. I didn't do it to sort of make myself look good. In fact, I don't. I look old, but it's definitely in there to help other people and kind of go, oh, actually, there is hope. Like even when you don't think there is, there's stuff happening. There's great science happening, and this will hopefully give you that reminder.
Well, it's not that you're not a boring man. You're an ex-comedian. Come on. So listen, if people head to nziff.co.nz, and it sounds a bit depressing, but if you just put the word cancer in the search, you'll find it. You're definitely in Christchurch. You're definitely in Dunedin. There is a Wellington as well. So Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin in November. Check it out. Are you going to be attending all the things as well? Are we going to see you in Dunedin for a beer?
I would love to if I can get there. It's in my diary, but you know, it depends whether I'm allowed out. I'm in Auckland at the moment.
You're a leper in Auckland.
Yeah, no, I would definitely love to. There's two characters in the movie, and that makes them sound false. There are two people in the movie who are very important who are in Dunedin, and I'd love to be down there and sort of share the experience with them. But hopefully, I can get there.
I had the Dunedin publicist contact me yesterday about something else. I wonder if nothing else, and I'm happy to be involved in setting it up. I've got all the gears. At the very least, can organise you on the big screen via a live connection at the end of the thing. I might actually mention that to her.
Go for it. I'd be in if you're in. I'll either be there in person or we can do that. That sounds like fun.
Cool.
I'd like to go down because then I could get a behemoth beer from you.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Like, I've got the sponsor in. Look at that. I'm good. I'll get
them to send me some product, and we'll make sure we get some to you.
Cool.
So that'd be cool. Hey, dude, look, thank you. It's been such a fun time talking to you. I really genuinely appreciate you coming on. I think that, and I know that you're probably a Kiwi and you don't like the tall poppy syndrome and you're underplaying stuff, but it's an important documentary, especially in this current climate with other health questions going on, and what is out there now. What you've been through, I think, will resonate with a lot of people for a lot of reasons, not just about your cancer story. So thanks for being involved. Thanks for doing it. Thanks for writing what you've done. And it's been a pleasure. And I hope to see you in Dunedin. And if I do, we'll certainly come along to the screening. And,
Awesome.
and if we don't, I'll talk to the people down here and see if we can figure out how to get you on the big screen for a chat afterwards or something.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.